So this question says, create an equivalent expression to the following algebraic expression using distribution. And whenever you see that word distribution, I want you to think about the operation multiplication, okay? And that's because, put it down here and then drag it up, multiplication. And that's because whenever we're using the distributive property, we're doing distribution, and we're going to use multiplication in order to do that. Let's drag it up here. Okay, so now how exactly are we multiplying, and what exactly are we multiplying? Well, before we can even get into that, what I want you to do is I want you to take this algebraic expression inside the parentheses and break it up into its terms. So let's draw a long box around everything, and then we'll take it and we'll split up each of our terms. Okay. In fact, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in to this. Okay. Now let's take it and let's break it up into each of its terms. So we got 5h minus 7j plus 3.5k minus 8. Now that whole thing is the algebraic expression, but what are each of the terms? Well, our first term starts at the very beginning of the expression, and then we cut it off right before the first plus or minus sign we see. So we're going to drop a line down here, and that means our first term is positive 5h. The next term starts here, that's negative 7j, and ends right before our next plus or minus sign. So our second term in the expression is negative 7j. Our next term starts here and ends before the next plus or minus sign. So we'll drop this line down here, and that is our third term, positive 3.5k. And our last term is negative 8. So we've got 4 terms here, 1, 2, 3, 4. And what we're going to do is we're going to distribute this negative 4, let me change colors. This negative 4, we're going to take it and we're going to distribute it or multiply, remember we mentioned that before, or multiply each term inside by the term outside parentheses. I like to call that the touch term, okay? So let's zoom back out a little bit so we can write that in. And we call that our touch term. And the reason why I like to call it a touch term is because we know that that is the term outside touching parentheses. And so we'll just take that touch term, the term outside touching parentheses, and we'll distribute it to each term inside the parentheses, which we've already broken up. So this should be nice and neat. So our first term, or our first multiplication rather, sometimes also called the distribution, our first distribution is negative 4 times positive 5h. And when you're multiplying, what you're doing is you're just multiplying the touch term by the coefficient here of this term. So we're looking at negative 4 times positive 5, and the result of that is going to be negative 20h. So that's our first distribution, and we're done with that. So we're done with multiplying by the first term. The next thing we'll do is we'll multiply negative 4 times the second term, which is negative 7j. So now we've got negative 4 times negative 7, and a negative times a negative is a positive, so that's going to be positive or plus 28j, because 4 times 7 is 28. That is our second distribution. Now let's get to the next one, our third distribution, because we're going to multiply the touch term, which is our negative 4, times the third term here, which is positive 3.5k. So we've got negative 4 times positive 3.5. And even though you have a decimal, nothing really changes. You're still just multiplying that number there times this number here. So we've got negative 4 times positive 3.5, and that's going to be negative 14. And we'll just put our variable next to it. That's going to be negative 14k. So we're done with that distribution. So we finished our second before, we finished our third just now. And now we'll get into our final distribution. And we're going to multiply this times the last term inside parentheses, which is negative 8. So we've got negative 4 times negative 8. A negative times a negative is a positive. That's going to be positive 32. And there's no variables there, so we'll just leave it as positive 32. And we'll cross that off and we're done. So just to recap, we've got negative 4 times positive 5h. That gave us negative 20h. We had negative 4 times negative 7j. That gave us positive 28j. Then we had negative 4 times positive 3.5k, positive 3.5k, and that gave us negative 14k. And our last distribution was negative 4 times negative 8, which is positive 32. And remember, when we're talking about the separate terms, we say positive or negative. But when we read the entire algebraic expression, like our answer here, let me just box that real quick. When we look at our entire expression, our entire answer, we've got negative 20. That's when we read it with plus or minus. So this is negative 20h plus 28j minus 14k plus 32. And remember that the question was asking for what is the equivalent expression? Well, that's this right here, the result after all of our distributions. So we could very well say, let's zoom out. Zoom back in, that's still a little too much. So when they're asking which expression is equivalent or equal to an equivalent expression, we could say the expression negative 4 times 5h minus 7j plus 3.5k minus 8 is equivalent to the expression negative 20h plus 28j minus 14k plus 32.